This is a video to show you the installation and calibration of the V2 feeder stacker to the C64 cutting table. We've positioned the feeder to the cutter. It's centered on the cutter, and we also want to have a 55mm gap between the end of the conveyor and the support table on the cutter. And that 55mm gap is so the underside camera can be put in place at some time in the future. The next thing we need to do is make sure that the feeder is square to the cutter so we can feed a board up. So I have a test board here, and it's placed against the guides. So we'll feed that board up and we'll see if we're square. So we can do that, since this has already been homed and is ready to go, by setting it to auto. Now we have pick board option, and we'll pick a board up and it'll be delivered onto the support table where we can see if it's square to the cutter. So I have the underside camera motion turned on. I think this is good for all applications with feeder stackers. That way the board is going to go onto the table in a low position. So there we have a board on the cutter. We can now move the cutter beam up the board, and now I'll drop the gripper. You can see that it's very nicely positioned parallel to the gripper, so I think we're in good shape on that. Now, if it was not parallel, what we would do in that case is rotate the feeder so that the board, as it's presented to the cutter, is parallel to the gripper bar. Now we move on to the stacker. The stacker has been put in place. It's centered once again on the cutter. Now if we go over to the wide side of the stacker, we want the stacker to be moved as far forward to the cutter as possible. And what stops the stacker moving forward is this E-chain on the cutter and the leg. So we move the leg as far forward as we can until it almost touches the cables and the E-chain. That's as far forward as it can go. Then we measure the distance between the frame of the cutter and our frame, and we make sure that that's equal on both sides of the stacker. Also, we check the centering. We go from the frame of the cutter to the leg, and we make sure that that's the same on both sides of the stacker. So that'll square up the stacker to the cutter. So once you've squared the stacker frame to the cutter, you have to check the legs. We're just shy of 14 inches on this side. And on this side, we're at 15 inches. So we have to take this side and move it backwards. And there's a method to do that other than just slipping the pulley and the belt. We can do that electronically. So we go to the main screen, go to feeder, go back one. We go to the password protected, enter the password 6528, enter. And now we have in this screen, we have a feature that allows you to jog just one side. It's called Calibrate Horizontal number 2 position. So now we have a screen that allows you to jog just one side. So we have to enter another password, which is 10520. So it's 10520, enter. And now you can see we have a green dot. Now you have to be in manual mode. You have the green dot. Now we enable this, and now we can jog very slowly one side of the, and it's going to be the narrow side. So I'm jogging it now, and it moves very slowly, just one side, until we get, look good? Yeah. Okay. So now both sides are equal distance from the end of the legs, And that's how you can do that through the screen. So once you're done truing up both legs, all we need to do is press an E-stop, and that cancels this function. So now I'll reset the E-stop, and you can see that this is turned off now. It's important to turn it off. Then we can return and we can exit this. Now you see that the stacker needs to be homed again, and that's because once you've calibrated, it just cancels home. So I'll rehome it, and now we're all set, ready to go. We want to feed up a sheet, and we want to get that sheet as far onto the cutting table as possible. And the way we do that is by going to the touchscreen, going to feeder, going to back, and then level 2, and then here is place to cutter position location. Now, the maximum travel on a V2 feeder is 2375. That's a software limit for how far it can go forward. I know that if the gantry goes farther than that, it will contact the forward over travel switch at 2380. So we're going to set our place to cutter position, which is how far the gantry will come forward to place the board onto the cutter. We want to place it to 2370. So we're 5 millimeters less than our maximum forward travel. I think that's a good number for us. So we want to set it as far as we can onto the cutting table, and that will help in the feeder stacker setup to IPC. So to do that, of course, we could go change those settings as I've shown, and then of course we can always feed a board up by going to manual, pressing pick board twice. Now our test board in this case is this sheet right here. We want to make sure that it's close to the edge here and square, because this is what we're going to use to calibrate our system. So make sure that it's tight against the front guide. I also have underside camera enabled so that the board is presented to the cutter low, which is good. And now this is the position that our board will travel to onto the cutter table. Now we need at least 6 inches or 150 millimeters, but I know that this is farther than that. So this is a very good starting position. In order to set up IPC and calibrate the system, we have to be able to communicate to the feeder. I have a job set up here. It's all set up. I have the material size set. This is very important to calibrating and also the operation of the system. So first of all, we have to see if we can get this to communicate. So I'm going to go Edit, Options, and I'm going to go to Automation Devices. And you can see automation device is set as IBF feeder. It says use stacker because I have a stacker. I have an IP address to the feeder of 192.168.50.101. That's always the address of the feeder or of the automation. Also, we have other features in 2.5.1. You can see the software that's running on the feeder stacker. And then also, you want to check do not ask for update of PLC software version at startup. You don't want to update it because IPC does not support updating V2 feeder stacker software, so always click that off. So we know the address is 192.168.50.101. So most IPC's computers will have an Ethernet card installed that you will connect an Ethernet cable back to the switch that's located in the feeder. In this case, I have a USB to Ethernet connector. So we'll just check to make sure that that's connected properly, that we can communicate. So I'm going to go to network. I'm going to type in network, and I have Ethernet settings. I will click on that, and I'm going to go to change adapter settings, options that is. And now I know that mine is this number 2 one. So I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to go down to version 4 and look at Properties. And you can see this computer is set up for 192.168.50.110. So anything but 101. Now, that's set up correctly. The adapter is set up correctly. So we can say OK, we can say close and close. And now I'm going to go and see if I can ping it. So if I type in CMD, and I can get a command prompt. So on the command prompt, I can ping 192.168.50.101, enter, and we can see that we're getting replies, so we know we are connected to the automation. The next thing we have to do is set up the stacker to the table. So we're going to go to Edit, Options, and we go to Automation Devices, and we go Set Up Stacker Positions. And we say OK. All right, so now, there we go. And we have to enter the stacker position at table main reference point. And to do that, we need to disable the collision zone of the feeder and stacker. So we go to the main screen, we go to feeder, we go back 1, we enter password 6528. And now on this screen, there's a button that's bypass collision zone fault. We enable that, and now the feeder, or I'm sorry, the stacker and the cutting table are no longer protected against collision of the cutting beam to the stacker plenum. So we have to be very careful when we have this enabled. But we have to enable it in this moment to be able to set the stacker position at main reference. So to do that, we have to position an object at the 0 point of the table. And the 0 point is the crosshairs right here. We've transferred a mark out here. So I'm going to set this in that position. And we need to jog forward the stacker until the forward part of the plenum touches the object that we've put in its place. Now, to do that, we go back, we go to stacker, we go to jog. I'm going to jog, we have to be in manual. I go vertical jog first, and I'm going to lower the plenums so that they can touch that object. And now I'm going to select horizontal, and I'm going to jog it forward until it touches that object, and that will be the reference point. So I'll bring it forward. It's usually a little easier when there are 2 people. So I'll just bump it forward until I touch. There we go. I just touched it. So now we are in position at the machine 0. Next, we need to read the position of the horizontal of the stacker, and it says we're at 736.3. So we're going to round that off so that it's 736. Sorry, I said that wrong. Yes, 736 is going to be our 0 position. So we come over here and we change this number to 736 millimeters. So I'm going to enter 736 millimeters. And converts it to inches because we're running inches on this. All right, we know you're changing that. That's okay. All right, good. All right, now we need to calibrate the automation to the table. So we've set up a job. You can see we have to set up it's very important to set up our board size. In our case, it was 96 by 48 using the custom size. We're going to be running, let's go back to material handling. We're running feeder stacker production. That's good. And we're going to be registering edge recognition. And so we're just using the pointer on this. So we're going to feed the board up, and once it registers the board, finds the edge, we're then going to look at the position, and our goal is to try to get this number as close to 0 as possible. And we're going to do that by making adjustments to the feeder to table distance. Now, I typically start with 18 here, inches in this case, and run it up, and then we'll make adjustments to make this number 0. So I'm going to hit OK on this, and then we're going to run this job. So I'm going to reset the table, and I'm going to press play. Okay, it's initializing. So IPC has told the the feeder to go get the board. The board is firmly up against the front guide. That's important at this step. We'll bring the board forward. I have undersight camera on, so the board is always presented to the cutter in a low fashion. Measure tool height. Looks good. Now we're going to let it run a little until we see the material position get updated. All right, it's updated. I'm going to pause the job. Now we can see, cancel the job. We can see that our number is now minus 0.679 inches. 0.679 minus. So what we're going to do now is go back to edit options. Now we have 18 inches in there, so we're going to do 18 minus 0.679. Okay, so 18 minus, in this case it's minus 0.679, is a value of 17.321. So I'm going to enter that in up here. Go delete what's in there, 18, and we're going to make it 17.321. All right. Just going to check, edit options. 17.321 is our new value to calibrate the system. So I'm going to go OK. Now I'm going to return the sheet to the stack. We'll run it again, and we'll see if we've gotten this number closer to 0. Okay, I've returned the board to the stack, and we will run this job again and see if our corrections were good. So this calibration that we're doing is going to result in the stacker picking up the board with the leading edge of the plenum at the trailing edge of the board. So that's what this calibration is going to result in if we do it right. Pause it because the value has changed, and you can see that that's very, very close to 0. So I believe now that we've set up the automation properly. quickly through the system to ensure that our calibration has been done successfully. If successful, the trailing edge of the board should align properly to the leading edge of the plenums. That looks pretty good. Leading edge is at the leading edge of the plenum. So our calibration has been successful. So we tried to run the first job to bring the sheet up, and on this first attempt, we get IPC failed to verify the selected stacker position. Now I've seen this before, and the way I've been able to resolve it is to go to stacker, and then we're going to go back, and we're going to go level 2. And if we change these settings just by 1 millimeter, it seems to clear this problem up. And now we have to enable it from IPC. So we're going to go back to Edit, Options. We're going to go to Production. Oops, sorry. Automation Devices. And we're going to go to Set up Stacker Positions. All right. And now when we enter the screen, it also enables this screen. You can see it's enabled now on our touch screen. So now I'm going to change this by 1 millimeter. So I'm going to go 1887. Enter. And in the past, I have seen that will clear up this initial setting. So now we can go back, we can go OK, and we can close this. All right. And now we can try once again to run our job. Let's finish line. Now you can see that resolved our problem.